You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
Well, welcome to the Guitar Heroes podcast. How are you all doing?
Very well, thanks, Chris.
Yeah, good.
Was that a good opener? Was that okay?
I didn't know who you were talking. Are you talking to us, or are you talking to the three people that listen to this podcast?
We started today by saying that Chris is going to take the reins of this episode, and so it's over to Chris for the intro.
Okay,
well, and already we've taken over.
It's going well. It's going well.
Over to you, Chris.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. Say another word.
Okay. Well, we briefly touched upon this in the last couple of episodes, actually. But Guitar Hero of the Day, and we're going to put that over to Van Halen.
Ooh. Okay.
And been doing a little bit of research, but my opinion is, since Hendrix, perhaps the last true guitar hero. I mean, everyone's going to have their own opinions, but obviously I've got a few points that maybe we can touch upon as a discussion and kind of go from there. So
I'd like to touch upon your points, Chris. Yeah.
Okay, would you?
I like the way Chris has just jumped straight in. We said Chris is
I
going
have
to take the
jumped straight
reins.
in.
And
There's
he's 30
absolutely,
seconds in.
absolutely no foreplay there, Chris. Is there? You've gone straight for the meat and veg. Nice one.
Give him 3 minutes and he'll be wrapping up. He said, "Thanks for listening to this podcast."
The trouble is, our podcasts are they're going on like 2 hours, I think.
I know,
so,
we're gonna make this one intentionally a little bit shorter after last week's mammoth with Alan, and this is a drum-free zone this week, so
yeah, it's probably going to be shorter, mainly due to my rubbish internet connection today.
Can we also just point out that Phil is currently wearing a dressing gown, which I think needs to be on record so that people can get the full idea of this.
Well, actually,
should we jump into Phil's rant? Should we do that now?
Do you want to get
Let's
it over
do it.
with?
I want to get it over. I want to get straight into it.
Okay, let's do Phil's rant. Cue the music. Phil's rant. Okay, yeah. So there's a reason why I'm in my pajamas today, why I'm in my dressing gown and everything. That's because I have to self-isolate.
Oh, what?
Yeah, I've got to self-isolate. So what happens is I've got to have a procedure at the hospital on Wednesday, which is actually tomorrow. So Sunday, it's Tuesday now, by the way. So Sunday, I had to go for a COVID test. You know, the old drive-through COVID tests where they stick the cotton bud up your bum and then in your nose and things like that. Okay.
Yeah.
In that order.
Yes, it was. Yeah. Lastly, did it around my tonsils, and lastly, which I thought that can't be right. Anyway, so yeah, I've now got to self-isolate for 3 days. So I just thought, well, what's the point getting dressed? What's the point? There's no point. Nobody's going to see me apart from my wife, and she doesn't really look at me anymore anyway. So what's the point? And so anyway, yeah, the kind of rant is I've got to go for a gastroscopy. I can never say that word. Basically, right. I've got to have a camera shoved down. I've had this before, and it didn't go well, I must admit. So I'm getting knocked out for it this time because I don't want to hear all the gargling and things that goes on when you have one of those. So my main thing for this is I've got a really bad acid reflux, and I've had it for a long time, and I've been on omeprazole tablets for probably 15, 18 years, something like that, which is not a good thing to be on.
No.
Now, I think what's the reason? Why have I got this problem? And I think it's because after gigs, I used to go and have kebabs and curries and things like that. And you think at one point I was doing like 200 gigs a year, and you know, that seems a bit weird now, doesn't it? Saying I used to gig 200 gigs a year. You can't even do 2 a year at a minute, can we? Yeah, gig.
What's a gig?
So it's annoying me. I mean, food's getting better on the road. Okay, there are lots more of these. I don't know what they're called, but they're these in services. You get these fancy where you get a lettuce leaf and a cucumber and pay 12 quid for it.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's it. So you get these. Now that's good. All right, they're expensive, but you know what's open on a night after a gig? Chuffing McDonald's. I hate McDonald's, okay? I'm a vegetarian, and you go into McDonald's, you can either have a spicy bean burger, a spicy wrap, or chips and cheese. Now, I did a gig a few weeks ago. We were starving, so we went to this McDonald's. I was like, oh, no, must we? But it's all the word. We didn't get any dinner at the venue or anything because apparently there's this COVID thing. You're not even allowed to eat with public or anything anymore. So So yeah, we went to this McDonald's. I said, nothing on the menu for me, and I said, "Oh, is it vegetarian? Oh, we don't do vegetarian anymore."
What?
I'm like, "Oh, right." So chips and cheese again, is it? And I'm like, it's really annoying. Why didn't somebody have like something really good on a night? Why do people? Everybody's going on about, oh, you must be healthy and everything like that. And the only thing you can eat late at night is McDonald's or KFC or something rubbish like that. And I think that's what's destroyed my insides. Thank you. Good night.
Hey! Well, on that note, McDonald's were giving out free cheeseburgers yesterday, and I actually went down and got one.
They have to give it away now. It's such crap.
But no, you are right. This is a thing that we've actually found ourselves getting a little bit addicted at points. I think, haven't we? Because it is the only option when you're on the road and you come out of a gig at 11:00, 11:30. McDonald's is the only thing that's open. Particularly for us when we're traveling on, motorways and we're leaving one venue and we're heading straight 2 hours in another direction. Our only option for food when we're starving is McDonald's. And it's a really difficult thing to plan on the day because you tend to go on stage right when you'd normally be having like an evening meal. Yeah. And I find that the appetite tends to disappear a little bit before the show because you're getting excited, you're getting kind of anxious and pumped up. And also it's not good to eat immediately before you go on stage. So we try and eat maybe 4:30, 5 o'clock. Then you put a 2-hour show in the middle. You're naturally going to be absolutely famished when you come off stage, aren't you? And we all launch out into the night in search of food and inevitably end up at the Golden Arches.
Well, I mean, you do like an 8-hour shift. But like you say, sometimes we don't even eat at 5 o'clock. We eat earlier than that. I like to eat as early as possible purely because I don't want to barf up a sausage roll on stage as I'm singing. It's not a pretty sight, So you got to kind of plan your day and you go, right, okay. And then you put in your work hours. All right. Now people say, oh, yeah, it must be great just doing 2 hours playing on stage. There's a lot more to it than that, trust me. And that's another podcast and, I think it itself. But, yeah, so by the time 11 o'clock, we come off stage at about 10 to 10 o'clock. 11 o'clock, we're in the bus ready for going. And we're starving. You've done a day's work.
Yeah.
And you've got to eat at that time of day. And all you've got is crappy McDonald's. I'm sorry, I'm quite annoyed about that. I don't like McDonald's.
The thing is, you can prep food to take with you for after shows, but it's having a hot meal. I think I really just something hot. I think something substantial rather than like a tin of beans, which is what I had done for a while. It just doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't fill that hole for me. So but yeah, McDonald's is unfortunately one of the only options that delivers hot food at that time of day. And
I mean, Burger King, I suppose, ain't much better, but they've made the effort. They're doing the halloumi burgers and they're doing like a plant-based burger. Which obviously there's probably more meat eaters than vegetarians even today, but so they're making the effort but they're not open.
No. McDonald's has got it sewn up, hasn't it? Because it's that 24-hour thing, and we don't even have to plan it. We know that within 15 minutes on a drive, we're going to pass a McDonald's. They've absolutely thought of everything. But
until you really want to look for one, and then you can't find one anywhere.
Yeah, until we actually decide. We've normally had 3 days off. We've been really good. We're not gonna eat any junk, and then we're gonna go, right, lads, we're gonna treat ourselves tonight, and then we cannot find one for love and money.
I think secretly inside I'm going, yes, good.
So that Phil's rant. Anything more to say on that?
No, that's it. I do not want to be endorsed by McDonald's.
McDonald's.
You can shove that up your golden arch. I'm not interested. Okay. Thank you very much.
Right.
But I would be happy to have the old.
But some of the things you've touched upon, I think would be good for a later podcast anyway. I think some good stuff in there. I think
food on the road.
About.
Send us your suggestions, maybe. If there's anyone listening at home that's got some good suggestions of healthier options when travelling on the road, then please, we're all ears. Please let us know.
Stay at home's not an option.
No.
We can take portable barbecues with us. Bring a chef along or something. And
oh, dear. I like the way
on the
you
side
go with
on
this.
side of the road, frying some bacon or something.
He's vegetarian.
Inside the M25 or something. Hey,
he's vegetarian. Bacon ain't going to be what he wants.
Oh no, there's lots of good options. If you can take your own stuff, there's loads of good options. In fact, Richmond have just brought a sausage out now. Well, it might have been.
Oh mate, their Richmond veggie sausages are amazing. They taste just like the real deal.
Yeah. There's another thing as well here. Sorry, I will be over with this in a
No,
second.
it's fine.
No,
This
no,
is
this
great.
is good. This is good.
But the other thing is, a lot of people say, "Oh, if you're vegetarian, why are you trying to replace? Why are you trying to, replace meat?" Type thing. Why do you still want a sausage? And why do you still want bacon? Well, I love meat. Meat tastes bloody lovely. Okay, I'm not going to deny that. I've been a veggie for over 2 years, or nearly 2 years now. And yet, meat is lovely. It tastes fantastic, and it gives you vitamins that you need. And that I'm not disputing that. I just don't want to murder animals. That's my big thing. I'm even changing my guitar straps to vegan ones. That's it. I'm not saying I don't not like the taste of meat. Yeah, I love the taste of meat. I just don't want to go through that whole process to get meat.
Fair enough.
I don't want and I don't force it on people either. That's just my thing.
Well, I didn't think that 15 minutes into a podcast we would be here talking about Richmond vegetarian sausages and Phil's vegan straps. I think we can officially say that Chris's intro has been somewhat derailed.
Oh, no, it was Chris that said, "Okay, then let's get Phil's rant out of the way."
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Now Chris can start working through his list. Chris, over to you.
Okay, let's jump into Chris's corner, shall we?
Oh, yes. Okay.
There we go. Chris's corner. Cue the music. Okay, so before I was not rudely interrupted. We actually went on to a good discussion there, but briefly speaking about Van Halen as hero of the day, should we say?
Yeah.
But I brought up a potential argument or a discussion for us to have about him potentially being, since Hendrix, the true last guitar hero. And I think the reason being is because he had a mixture of technique, songcraft, and a meticulous approach to shaping his tone and image. So the first point that comes to mind with Van Halen is two-handed tapping.
Yeah,
I think since Hendrix, he basically, I suppose, threw away the rule book and reinvented it in his own image. And one of the things was two-handed tapping. Does anyone want to give us a demo of that? Because I know in the previous podcast there haven't been any playing.
Well, this is Chris's
Go on,
corner.
Phil,
We're not supposed to be interrupting.
Yeah,
that's fine.
We can interrupt with guitars there.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to do a real feeble attempt at two-handed tapping. You ready? Let's sing this.
Oh yeah,
let's
give
that was a bit of Van Halen. Oh,
lovely.
That was on my straps, so it'll be out of tune for a week now. Does anybody else go on, Chris? And have you got anything tappy wise?
I don't know actually. Probably, I know a little bit of Eruption, I think. Something like that. I don't know. I'm not a two-handed tapping sort of guy. I don't think. I used to years ago when I was working on Steve Vai material, but now when I pick up the Strat, it just doesn't seem to kind of call that sort of playing to me.
That was the first time I think I really heard tapping, and I guess we should maybe just explain, because obviously there's going to be guitar players listening, but maybe there might be some non-guitar players listening. But finger tapping is that thing that you've probably seen if you check it out on YouTube, where instead of using a plectrum to pick the string, you fret with your left hand, but you reach across with the right hand and you literally tap the fretboard, and it gives you this really kind of smooth sound that is it's impossible to create with a pick, and it means that you can make stretches and shapes and reach across the notes in bigger ranges than you'd ever be able to with one hand, essentially. I think there was evidence of it being around before Eddie Van Halen, wasn't there? There's this famed, was there like some sort of gypsy jazz player or classical player?
I think you're right, actually.
Yeah, I've seen a few articles. I should probably look into it more because I forget the chap's name. But there's evidence of it being around. But certainly in the rock and metal and electric guitar genre, then I think Eddie Van Halen is the original proponent.
That's who you think of, isn't it? When you think of tapping, that's straight away you think of old Eddie Van Halen.
And he definitely set the pathway for guitar players like Vai to follow, because I know there's a really good interview with Steve Vai talking about him hearing Van Halen for the first time, doing his tapping, and he necessarily didn't want to copy it, but kind of do his own thing with it. But Yeah, most likely was someone before Van Halen, but obviously everyone just jumps at Van Halen when they think of two-handed tapping, if you're a guitarist especially.
Well, I remember the first time. The pitfalls of Zoom.
Yeah. I was going to say, anybody that like the non-guitar players out there that are not familiar with the tapping or the sound or what that is, the Beat It solo, Michael Jackson's Beat It solo. If you listen to that, there's the tapping on that solo, which is basically listen for the really fast, clever bit.
It's actually not tapping, Phil.
Oh, is it not?
No. There is a period, there is a moment of tapping in the song, but the big stretches he does up here, actually, it's all hammer-ons.
Oh, blimey.
And I literally, it's such a big stretch to do. I always tap it. I've done that song a few times on a few gigs, and for me to actually play it, I just tapped it because that's what it sounds like in my head. It sounds like it's tapped, and that's the impression tapping gives you. It's almost that legato sort of feel that you hear that with, like, guitar players like Santana, but obviously the range of notes is a lot larger with tapping, makes it more accessible. But yeah, that, I think the part you're talking about is actually all hammer-ons.
Well, two things there. Disclaimer, don't listen to a bloody word I say. And secondly, doesn't that show what a monster Eddie Van Halen is?
Insane. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely incredible guitarist.
But that's the perfect example, actually, for anyone who's not necessarily a guitar player or is not overly familiar with Eddie Van Halen's work within the band Van Halen. I'm sure they will be familiar with Michael Jackson's Beat It. And if you've ever heard that fantastic guitar solo that creeps up in the middle of it, that is Ed, and that is he put his stamp on that song.
He only plays the solo on that song. I think Steve Lukather wrote that song, didn't he, and plays the riffs in the song. And
correct. I don't know if he wrote it.
He wrote the part. He wrote the guitar part for it.
Oh, okay.
And actually, I think Lukather played bass on it as well.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. I've got the Gospel According to Luke, which is a really good book if anybody is into Toto or anybody just into music or guitars. Just get the Gospel According to Luke, the Steve Lukather biography. Is fantastic. But if you don't like bad language, then don't get it. It's a great book. I've read it twice.
I think you're right, Chris. I think in terms of the influence that Eddie put out into the world and the players that we have after, his playing aside, I think that is one of the most significant things about any one guitar hero is who we have today because of their existence. So all of these massive icons, whether it be going back to Hank Marvin and then Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, and moving through, you have these icons amongst icons that if we didn't have those individual players, I mean, how many guitar players would we not have if we didn't have Hank Marvin? We wouldn't have Brian May, for instance.
No,
we wouldn't have Phil Walker. And the same goes for Jimi Hendrix. How many players today would we not have, or who would look very, very different if we didn't have Jimi Hendrix? And I think Ed falls into that category. How many people would we not have, or how many bands and songs would be so different today had those guitar players not heard Eddie Van Halen's work? Because 1978, that's when the first album came out. You have to think what it was coming out in amongst at that time. Yes, there was lots of rock music, but you listen to that album and it still sounds modern. There's still elements of production and particularly guitar tone, because I think that's where he was a pioneer.
That's the next point I wanted to jump onto.
Well, there we go, Chris. Over to you.
There we go. Lovely segue. Guitar tone and effects. And I know he's very meticulous with this. He was almost like a bit of a scientist, like Einstein as a guitar player or something, where he would be messing around with mods on amplifiers and especially the voltage on amps using the Variac, which played a big part in his sound. It almost created like a big, more of a squashy and compressed tone.
I think it's known as the Brown sound.
The Brown sound, that's right. And actually,
Brown sound is a very different thing in the band Van. In the band Van, if someone says Brown sound, it's time to evacuate.
It's usually when Al's there, to be fair.
Yeah.
But it's right you're saying about that, Chris. And would you say that maybe Eddie Van, that people have these super strats now, don't they? Especially through the 80s, they had what they called a super strat. And maybe Eddie Van Halen was maybe he sort of was a catalyst to that. Maybe he started the Super Strat.
I think he was one of the first to really bring modifications and the idea of customizing your equipment. So like Chris has said, his Marshalls that he was using, they were modified. He was messing with the internal voltages to change the sound. He was using bits of equipment. He would carry his Echoplex around and use that. That was probably prior to that a studio item, but for Ed it became something that he used live. And then the guitar itself, the Frankenstrat, the Frankenstein guitar, which if you just Google an image of it, check it out. It's one of the most heavily cobbled together, modified guitar. It appeared in various different formats over the years. And before that, I don't know whether there was really a culture. These days, there's a massive culture of modifications and modifying your equipment, swapping out pickups and customizing it. Before Ed was there that? Were guitar players doing that? I don't know that really was a thing.
Don't
Well,
think
you had
so.
Les
Not that
Paul,
I'm aware
didn't
of.
you? I mean, Les Paul.
But I see him more as an inventor. You know, he was starting from scratch and coming up with things out of the blue. Whereas I think Eddie really pushed that idea of taking things that are out there, but then adjusting them, tweaking them. Like you say, the one pickup guitar. How many one pickup guitars were there before Eddie? I mean, obviously you had Les Paul Juniors and stuff, but his wasn't a one pickup guitar. It was a guitar that he'd pulled the other pickups out because he liked the sound of a single pickup.
He shoved the selector switch in where the middle pickup would have been, just because he somewhere to put it.
Yeah,
It's hilarious.
But a pioneer of guitar sounds as well. So instead of as well as techniques and setting a benchmark for other players to follow or aspire to, he was pushing tonal, pushing the guitar sounds and tones as well. So we got the Variac. Guitar modifications and modifications, obviously, with the Variac. Oh, talking about the Variac, Rick Beato does a really good video on YouTube about that. I think it's titled The Brown Sound, with another fellow guitarist called Rhett Scholl.
Right.
Yeah.
A really good video, and they basically try to recreate that Van Halen sound using the Variac. It's really interesting.
It's when you look at pictures through the 80s of Eddie Van Halen's gear, there's racks and racks of stuff in there. You look backstage, there's probably like 10 Marshalls or something like that, and then the rack full of effects and what have you. And then, where you see another clip with Eddie Van Halen. He's got a Marshall, his guitar, and a phase pedal.
Yeah, very true.
Oh, actually, the phase 90 as well. Is it MXR? Is it?
Yeah,
or
that's
that was a big part of his sound as well. I don't actually have one set up in my stomp. I'm going through a HX stomp today, I think. But I could probably get one on just to kind of give you an idea of the sound.
Yeah. Do it. It was a signature part of his sound, as well as his technique and his just touch and the way he played the guitar. He used key ingredients, certainly in those first few albums. That was the modded Marshall, high gain humbucker pickup, and then the Echoplex, plate reverb, and the phase, which Chris can hopefully show us.
Yeah, well, I've got just the sound without. This is with. Probably too heavily mixed in there, but.
Well, I think the key to get the Eddie sound is to set the rate really low. So he wanted it just to have this slight shimmer, this slight movement, so that when he played lead parts, it would just jump out of the mix slightly. So instead of it going, it would just move very slowly.
I think I've got it there.
Yeah, that's better.
And you kind of hear it in the tapping as well. It's almost, you can almost hear it taking effect almost.
Yeah.
And that's influences as well. I mean, look at Brian May. He's had he's got that similar sort of sound, hasn't he? With the effect. I think he uses chorus, but he's used phase as well. And who influenced who there?
Yeah, actually, yeah, absolutely. But you hear it a lot. Like, sorry, Phil.
Do you know what? I didn't think I was a Van Halen. I wouldn't say fan. I wasn't a Van Halen super fan. But then the more you start thinking about it, the more you know
this
about
is the thing. Exactly. I'm literally digging into it just for this podcast. I'm like, my God, he's done so much. It's unreal. And
did you know he was born in the Netherlands?
Yes.
Was he?
He was born in the Netherlands. Yeah, yeah. Anyway.
I think you're right though. I think that most guitar players, modern guitar players, whether they feel like they're heavily into Eddie Van Halen or not, they probably are, kind of through osmosis. It's filtered down through so many guitar players that actually you think, oh, I'm really into this guy, and then if you look into it, oh, okay, well he was influenced by this guy. Oh, and he was a massive Eddie Van Halen nut. He just changed the landscape. And I think he was one of the first real guitar nerds that came out and was so into the music, but also so into just honing his sound and perfecting his thing that it was the full package. It was writing songs, the playing, but it was also that dedication to getting the best guitar sounds that he could. And that's where the modifications came in. And obviously since then, it's now the norm. It's almost rare to find a guitar player, other than maybe the early 90s when you had the grunge scene and all of that. Really, outside of that, most people now view that with such an importance, because if you're delivering your art, your message, your music, then the way in which it's conveyed, i.e. the sound, the tone, that's such an important part. And that's where we've got this whole guitar industry from. All these variations, all these... back in the 60s, if you wanted a Strat, it was like, well, do you want a sunburst one, or do you want maybe a white one or a red one or something? Or, you want an effects pedal, what do you want? You want a fuzz box or a wah? I
think that would have suited me and Chris, actually. I think we're both, build a patch on the Helix. What's the first thing I do? My AC15 model, always go there. It's always the same thing. And we're like that, Chris, aren't we? We kind of like the simplicity of things. What's the first thing I do? Pick my Strata.
All my patches are basically either actually, I have a Vox, actually. I think it sounds great on the Helix, actually, the Vox. But yeah, I've got like a Marshall and a Fender. It's like my go-to kind of sound.
Yeah, that might be true, but I can still see behind Phil there's about 30 guitars hanging on the wall, and there's a giant guitar rack with effects pedals and lights
all running
flashing.
for an AC15.
And I don't think it's far-fetched to say that all of that has, Ed's influence has filtered into that as well. Let's not forget that he also was heavily into the manufacturing side of things. He got involved with PV, and obviously later founded his own company, EVH, alongside Fender, so that he could really let that creative side of him flourish in the music retail industry. He had his name stamped all over products, and there's all these stories that say that when Fender were making the Eddie Van Halen amps, when they were first bringing out the EVH range, they literally were being held up in production because Ed wasn't happy. They were having to send prototypes to him, and he was having to sign them off. He was answering like customer feedback. He was sending email. He was that involved. Normally, when you get a signature model, there might be obviously some input from the artists themselves, but not to that degree where he's there hands-on, making adjustments. Send me the pedal. I'm going to make a tweak. I'll send it back to you. He was so into that world that I think as guitar players, we've all benefited from that, because now the range of choice when you go to buy pedals and amps is, so different to how it would have been 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah.
Talking about manufacturing, is it fair to say that he was one of the first guys to use the Floyd Rose? In terms of manufacturing parts for guitars, because obviously that in itself is almost like an effect. Obviously on the Strat, I can't quite do the. It's quite hard to do on a Strat and get the big range of motion with it. But if I go crazy on my on the whammy bar, my guitar's just going to go miles out of tune. But on a Floyd Rose, obviously you got the lock-in nut, and obviously you got two lock-in ends, haven't you?
Yeah.
For the string, so he can do all these crazy dive bombs. Was he the first guy to use the Floyd Rose?
Well, I do know he had patents, and I should have done a bit more research on this. I know he had a patent on I think on the headstock of a guitar. And he did have some sort of patent on the bridge assembly or the trem somewhere.
Right. Okay.
But I'd have to look that up a bit. Yeah. You tell these podcasts are not rehearsed or anything like that; they're just straight in, aren't they? But he had 3 patents to do the guitar. I do know that, so we'd have to look up and see exactly what they were. But yeah, he's probably got, like you say, Chris, is a massive deal to do with that old trem system.
Yeah.
he still sounds as modern as any other player. Like you get guitar heroes like Jimi Hendrix. They sound like Jimi Hendrix is a dated sound. I mean, obviously Jimmy's not around anymore, so we don't know. He may have kept up with the Joneses. We don't know.
Yeah.
But you can get Steve Vai, you could get John Mayer, or anybody. A nowadays player, and Eddie Van Halen still sounds, just well up there with them, doesn't he? He doesn't sound dated or anything. No. He's still Absolutely. Current.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that comes from just that pioneering side of him and that constant drive to just sound as best as he can. I think it's you either have that part of your mind or you don't, and there's no right or wrong, but some musicians are solely concerned with getting the music across and just crafting the song or whatever, or just the performance part of it. But I think he was just so well-rounded because he was so into every aspect. The songs had to be good, the performance had to be good, but the sound had to be good, and the tone and the recording.
Yeah,
the whole picture.
He wasn't just a guitar player. I think he was just an incredible musician, and everything he did was for the benefit of the music he was writing in Van Halen. And it brings me on to another point as well. With Van Halen, talking about songcraft and how there's another aspect of why he's such a great guitar hero is like he brought this sensibility of like pop music to rock. You take songs like Dance the Night Away or something, 79, and it's an absolute ballad, but it's got the rock flavor, but it's got all the pop elements which make it catchy. And you go as far as something like the song Jump, and like in the chorus, how the guitars tie into the vocal melodies, like with the he could have just played something like that, but it was so melodic. Everything he chose to do was so melodic, which is why I think is another aspect of why he's such a great guitar hero.
Let's not forget as well that I think he was a pianist first, and
he actually played drums.
He played all the keyboard parts. So Jump, that's Eddie playing the synth part on that, and the solo in that. Listen to that. He took it almost sounds like an Eddie Van Halen tapping solo, but played on a keyboard. So it's got those big kind of sweeping arpeggio type things to it. Really cool. Really cool.
Actually, you're right there, Chris, about that. He when
he
they
swapped
first
with
started,
his brother eventually.
He did, yeah. Alex Van Halen. It started on guitar, Eddie on drums, and apparently when Alex Van Halen had a go at playing Wipeout, they decided they should swap. So that was a good move, wasn't it?
Yeah. So a bit like yourself, Phil, he was a multi-instrumentalist. He played a variety of things, which shows his musicality, if anything. So all the choices he made.
People call me a mental multi-instrumentalist. I don't know about that.
But I think anyway, it just goes to show that all the choices he made for the guitar could be, the manufacturing, the tone, everything was all to complement the music.
Yeah.
But in turn, just made him an incredible guitar player, which everyone aspires to be in some way, even if they're not sure who he is. That they still do, like you said, Lee.
I think we're all in debt to him. If you're a rock guitar player, there's no two ways about it. You are in debt to Eddie Van Halen, whether that be directly or indirectly through other likes that you have, other guitar players. I really was into, and still am, I was really into Extreme and Nuno Bettencourt.
Mate, great band. Yeah.
He was like arguably more, I felt like he was more of an influence on me, maybe because of the era in which I grew up. And I just idolized and still do his guitar playing. But now, with hindsight, you can listen back, and the more and more I explore Eddie's work, clearly you would not have Nuno without Eddie. He's he's the next part of the chain. And like you guys were talking in previous episodes about Steve Vai, same thing. Would you have Steve Vai today if it weren't for Eddie? I think Steve would admit that probably not, or he would at least look very different. His guitar playing would be quite different. You're listening to the Guitar Heroes podcast.
You said, like Lee earlier, that we've always kind of been aware of Van Halen, but not quite knowing it. But I think actually now, as a kid, I used to listen to Michael Jackson when I was a kid, and obviously Beat It was being one of the songs.
Yeah.
And hearing that solo, just going, oh, that's cool. Not really knowing who that is or anything. I was just like, that's pretty cool. Even then as a non-guitar player, a fan of music, but kind of knew that was impressive at the time. And even now, like trying to play that solo is, it's tricky. It's not easy to get the nuances of Van Halen. Like in Eruption, there's so much swing to that solo.
I know what you mean. He doesn't conform, does he? He doesn't conform to the sort of the typical guitar playing devices. He made so many things so personal that it is a very, very hard sound. Even if you're a capable guitar player in other aspects, Ed's sound is a very difficult one to recreate because it was so personal. He played things that no one else really plays. He had this feel, this style, and he used melodic ideas that don't fall within normal concepts of music theory. So if you learn guitar like most of us do, unless you really study his playing, you're never going to be able to just play a few licks and sound like Eddie Van Halen, where I think there are other rock guitar players that even if you're not that into them, you could probably get by and do a good impersonation of them. But he's a very hard person to impersonate, I think.
Yeah,
and Chris has got the task of doing that next year in the show, so good luck with that, Chris.
I've learned the solo to the song.
Don't say the song. It's a surprise. Don't say the song.
I'm not revealing anything. Not revealing anything.
Good. Put your trousers back on.
We had to get one of them in. Well, there we go. I think we should wrap up because we've mentioned Eddie over the last few episodes, and obviously he's been in our minds of late because of his recent passing. It's very sad and massive impact on the guitar community. It seemed only fair that we dedicate this episode to him and kind of just air our thoughts on him. We haven't really prepared that much. We haven't gone away. I'm sure if you want to find out more, you can look it up online and, of course, go back and listen to the back catalogue. But that was just us kind of musing over him and sharing our experiences. And I guess from now we'll move on and we'll take a look at some other guitar heroes and have a new guitar hero of the week maybe next week.
I think the next podcast, is it Lee in the hot seat?
Is it me?
Yeah,
it can be me in the hot seat if you want.
Because you don't talk enough, I think. You need to have your own section next week, I think, Lee.
I keep forgetting this is Chris's episode. At least we got Chris's corner in.
We have everyone kind of leading at some point, but I quite like just to. I don't want everything thrown at me, mate. So don't deal with the pressure very well.
Well, should we try and let Chris wrap today up? He opened the podcast, so why don't we try
to summarize? Chris managed to get a word in,
just for the one.
Shut up. Okay, so Van Halen definitely a massive guitar hero, which influenced all the following guitar players to come out of Steve Vai, Nuno, which you mentioned. Just everyone, just a huge pioneer of not just guitar playing, but music, songwriting, guitar tones, modifications to guitars. Just had everything. Was the whole package. And if you're not a fan of Van Halen or not aware of him too much, then I would suggest going away, have a good listen. Definitely with some headphones. Don't listen on your phone. It's not the same experience. Do it how we did. Always headphones on and
vinyl.
Vinyl. I don't have any Van Halen vinyl. I must. I
tell you what, then that's what we should do, Chris. The next time we go, if we ever get back into a gigging again, because me and Josh, our guitar tech, who's no longer with us, we used to go hunting record shops if we had spare hour, after setting up and what have you. We used to go around looking for record shops and these rare, the albums and that. So we must do that. We must all go out and look for Van Halen records.
Definitely. That first album, if the cover is such an iconic image, isn't it? That would make a great piece in the collection. It's such a cool. I actually want it on the wall in here. I think that'd be really cool. Yeah. It's such an iconic image.
Sorry, Chris, we interrupted again.
No, it's fine. But it was great to chat with you guys again. Lee, do you want to jump on the socials?
Do you want me to do it? Are you sure?
Yeah, I can't remember what the socials are, to be honest. I don't have them written down.
well, I think I've mucked it up every
there's
week
There's an Insta thingy, isn't there? Or like Facebook.
That's the one.
Facebook.
So yeah. If you want to get in touch, please do send us your comments and your messages. We do like to read them, and any questions you might have for any of us about anything we've discussed, please get in touch. You can find us on Instagram. Just search @PhilWalkerGuitar, @Lee Troy Guitar, and at Chris Anthony Guitar. Did I get that correct, guys? Are we good?
Absolutely.
I don't know.
So that's Phil Walker Guitar, Lee Troy Guitar, and Chris Anthony Guitar on Instagram. On Facebook, you can find us. It's Phil Walker Guitarist, Lee Williams Guitarist, and Chris Anthony Guitar. Are we all good?
Yeah.
Lovely.
On the YouTube as well. I probably don't know what it is. No, it's if you say Phil Walker Guitarist on YouTube.
And of course, we've got the thing that unites us all. We've got the guitar show, which we can't wait to get back to. Just search Story of Guitar Heroes on Instagram or Facebook, or you can head to www.storyguitarheroes.com to check out the official website and see some dates that we hope will go ahead when we can eventually get back to the thing that we love and get out there on the road and maybe take you with us.
Right.
Well, there we go.
Okay, wonderful. Until next time, I'll see you guys soon.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for listening, and it's been a pleasure talking to you all as usual. And now I'm not going to go get dressed.
See you next week. Bye.
Bye. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
I've got indigestion. I think it's all the tea Maria in my coffee.